Anybody who's willing to listen
Dog.
to us,
Dogs and
welcome.
cats.
Welcome to the Muscle Science for Women
Welcome.
podcast. I am one of your hosts, Ashley, and who's over there?
Hey, I'm Rachel. What's up?
And I am tuning in from a full-on blizzard, you guys. It is blizzarding outside.
Oh my goodness. I can't. I didn't tell you when I was in Vegas. Did I tell you this? It's cold in Vegas, right? In this time of year. And I
Ish.
was okay, so last year I was wearing like a heated vest and
Are you
like
what are
15
we okay?
blankets.
Talk to me about cold. What do you mean by cold with a heated vest? Talk to me about
Okay,
temperature
like
here.
last year, I think it was like in the 40s, but it was the wind because it's in the desert. So the
Right.
wind is like super, super intense. This
Okay.
year was not as bad because the sun was out, so I actually didn't even wear my heated vest. Um,
You're so brave.
I know, but I'm like I am a wimp when it comes to the cold.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was cold, and every day I was like, thank God I do not live in the cold year
Yeah,
round.
it's been very interesting seeing there was that whole couple of weeks where all of these like southern states that have never like Florida got all the snow
Oh
and
yeah,
like Texas, it was crazy, but and I don't want to minimize like that is crazy for people who have zero experience or like infrastructure or resources to handle it.
hmm
But also, I mean, you have to know that like 99% of America or Canada was like looking at like the Texas snowstorm where like their entire cities were shut down and like you could still see the grass poking up through the snow. And I'm
yeah,
like, guys, come on, come on. Like, what are you
yeah.
gonna, I don't know. People would not last a day up here. But anyway, where I live it's not like the snowiest place in Canada. So I'm not super pumped about what's going on outside,
hmm
but the upside, you got to look at the silver lining about these things because the upside to snowstorms is that it like gives you a little bit of this um like okay to not have to do things, because
Yeah,
it's like, well, I can't get in the car because it's dangerous out there. And so I
yeah,
guess I just have to shut her down and just like eat some snacks and cuddle
yeah,
and cozy up and read a book, watch a movie, and that's what I'm going to be
yeah,
doing. So that's that.
yeah. I do miss
Um,
that. Like we used to have a few snowstorms growing up, like in
yeah,
New
New
York,
York. Yeah.
and they would close school sometimes and it was like a snow day, and
hmm
I miss that a little bit, but not
Yeah. Not enough
not
to
enough.
live in a cold place.
No.
One thing I liked when I lived in New York was like I find New York has some of the best, like the most temperate climate for me personally, because I like having all the seasons, like living in places. When I
hmm
lived in Bermuda, there's no fall, there's no winter. It feels a little weird to
Yeah.
me, but I also don't like extreme cold. So it was really nice, like when I lived in New York, that there'd be winters where you could wear like a light jacket year
Yeah.
round, and then there'd be a winter where there's like 5 feet of snow. But I
Yeah. I
I
hear
don't know.
you.
I'm not big on the crazy cold either. But anyway,
Anyway,
this isn't a weather
we'll
podcast. Yeah,
diverge.
we
What? Yeah, I
will.
was like, this isn't a weather podcast.
Yeah, this isn't a weather
Let's talk about
podcast.
women and health and muscles and
Do you think there
all
are
that
weather
stuff.
podcasts and like just dads listen to them or something? Like, what? I
Um,
bet there's a weather podcast that exists somewhere.
maybe.
Anyway,
Probably.
let's
I
move
won't be
on.
listening to it.
Let's move on. We do have some questions from listeners, and I have a couple that I got from Instagram, and then we have a couple in the inbox. And this is just a reminder, everybody, that if you would like to ask us a question or even just recommend, like, do you have a topic that you want us to touch on that we haven't? We've got some single topic episodes coming up, and we like to put those out sometimes when we think a topic really warrants like a deep dive. So if there's
hmm
something that we haven't really covered, go back through our episodes first. But if there's something we haven't covered that you really want us to talk about, we'd be happy to do that. If there are some really fancy, smart people out there you'd like us to have on the podcast, we don't do that a ton, but we're open to it. If there's somebody who we think can really benefit our listeners,
hmm
we're open to that. So any kind of feedback or thoughts that you have for us, please feel free to send them to our inbox. We read all our emails. And the email address is musclescienceforwomen@gmail.com. Number four. We love all the emails that we get. And
Yes.
that's it. Okay. So we've got a
Cool.
couple questions here. Let's start with a nice, quick one. This is from, I believe her name is pronounced Anya, and she's asking about evening versus morning lifts. So she says, "Hi guys, I recently discovered your podcast and I love it so much. Thank you." Thanks,
Mhm.
Anya.
Thanks.
I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts on lifting in the evenings versus morning from a hormone, energy, mood as a woman perspective. I've been an avid 6 a.m. lifter for a bit over a year now, but I've recently joined a gym that's closer to my apartment and I've been incorporating more evening workouts
Mm.
after work around 6:30 to 7. Mood wise, I tend to prefer working out in the morning because it sets the tone for my day, but I've noticed being able to sleep in more tends to help make me feel more recovered. So she says
Mm.
basically, if the number of hours of sleep is the same in both situations, does lifting time of day make a difference? What sorts of questions might you ask yourself to get to the bottom of which time of day makes your body feel best? I thought that was a really well
That's a good question.
worded, thoughtful question. So thank you
Hmm.
for that.
Yeah.
And Rachel, what do you think?
Yeah. So great question. I do think that the first thing is just overall looking at like your ability to be consistent throughout the week. So like the first thing is like your body and your circadian rhythm will start to adjust to your workout times, right? So if you're going back and forth from like 2 days a week you're doing morning workouts, 2 days a week you're doing evening workouts, it's going to be a little bit harder for your body to start to regulate and become accustomed to that. So that's kind of the first thing. Like if you have to do that, I know there's some people like with their schedule, there's no other option. It's either they do that or they don't work out. That's one thing. But picking one versus the like picking morning workouts or evening workouts or lunchtime workouts, whatever it is, and staying consistent with that over the course of a period of time, like months, is going to be the best way to get into a routine, not just from like your everyday standpoint, but like your body's physiological clock and like expecting and this will also go with like recovery as well because your meal timing will be a little bit different. Like especially if you're paying attention to pre-workout and post-workout meals and, gearing that up. So that's kind of the first thing. It's just like overall, what do I know I can be consistent with over the course of a period of time?
Hmm.
The second thing is like she brought up recovery. I think that's a huge piece of it too. How you're recovering, what your energy levels are like during your workout, how you're sleeping, all of those are going to be things to pay attention to. But I don't think that you can really know those things in a very like solidified way until you follow this training for a certain amount of weeks, right? Because doing it just once or twice, it's not going to give you the feedback that you need in order to like know, okay, am I actually recovering better? Is this actually better for my sleep? Am I actually seeing improvements in like my progression within my training program over time? So again, that kind of comes back to the time thing. From my personal experience, I've done both. I've done all, and I've had clients. I have clients who've done all early morning, late morning, lunchtime, right after work, and then late at night. Like there's a spectrum, and I've done it too. For me, working out at night, anytime after like 6 o'clock, it for me it always disrupted my sleep, and also just I had worse recovery from like the sleep standpoint because it was harder for me to settle down after the workout, right? Like if you're working out at 6:30 at night, by the time you're done, 7:30, but by the time you eat your dinner, it's 8:30, then you're kind of getting into that later night. And in terms of like your hormones and your the signals that your body's sending you, like it can be a bit harder to kind of wind down from that. Um, and maybe you can fall asleep, but are you really getting like the quality sleep that you would want? So that's something for me is anytime I worked out at night, I just didn't sleep as well. I didn't recover as well, even if the hours were the same. But that's me, right?
Hmm.
Um, I do think in general, with like general evolution, I guess you could say, most people are probably going to do better working out earlier in the day. Like you said, getting that kind of, once you get it out of the way, you feel, motivated to do other things throughout the day. You're able to really kind of like fuel the rest of the day as well. So I think that's important. But I personally just think it does come down to like you as an individual and figuring out, okay, can I stick with this for a certain amount of time to really see the pros and cons and then like list out those pros and cons and kind of weigh those for yourself,
Hmm.
um, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I have gone on record saying that if the only time I could work out is like early morning or alternatively right after work, like work rush hour, I would rather just not be fit. I would rather just not work out at all because both of those times are so miserable for me personally.
Yeah.
But I think, what you said about the consistency thing is absolutely important. And if we want to get a little bit more granular and we can talk about, and you touched on this, but like the stress sort of response of training and how obviously doing really intense workouts later at night is going to be harder because your heart rate's going up, your like cortisol is kind of going up. It's going to possibly make it harder for you to rest. However, the same could also be said for these super early morning workouts
Hmm.
if you aren't kind of paying attention to what you're doing. So if you're a morning person and if you're consistently getting up at 6 and working out and that feels good to you, great. But some other things to think about are you doing all of these workouts like fasted with a giant cup of coffee? Are
Hmm.
you dehydrated? Are you not warming up and cooling down properly? Are you again not fueling very well if you're lifting, if you're working out really hard? These are things to think about too, because when you wake up in the morning, that's when your cortisol is naturally the highest, and that's great and that's normal. But if you are stacking on top of that a hard workout where you maybe again aren't hydrated well, are jacked up on caffeine or pre-workout, and maybe not eating or something, that may not be good either. So I'm not saying that's
Hmm.
what she's doing. I'm just saying these are things to consider. You want to do it when it feels best for you and when you can do it consistently, and also when it's sort of best for your body and
Hmm.
what you're doing around that workout as well is the only thing I'd add. If you have like the perfect flexible schedule like some of us do or sometimes have, it seems like the research shows that sort of a mid-morning to early afternoon is like
Yeah.
the best time because you're sort of awake, you're probably have eaten something, drank something, your nervous
Hmm.
system is online, you're feeling good, it's not early, it's not late. And I know most people don't have the ability to do that. If you do, that's sort of like 10 a.m. to like 1, 2 is like a
Yeah.
really nice time. And that's when I prefer to work out. Like mid morning is
Same.
really ideal for me.
Yeah.
Um,
You're
but yeah,
literally reading my mind like word for word right now. These are all things that
dude,
I was gonna add. Like I was
so
like, yeah, if you had
connected.
the ideal thing, like that would be it. Because like you said, you have a meal or two,
Yeah.
it's not too late. So around like lunchtime, early, like 11 to 1-ish, like you said, if you had a
Yeah.
perfect, and that's when I was able to adjust my schedule and I started working for myself. I started working out around that time and like I haven't gone back. So
Yep. 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 So I think
cool.
again, summary, consistency and what feels good to you. And then just make sure that you're taking care of the other elements of what's going on. Are you like warming up, cooling down? Are you fueling? Are you
Mhm.
hydrating? All that good stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Sweet. Okay. We've got another
Great
question
question.
here from
Yeah, mine, I still can't read them,
It's
so
okay. I'm
my
gonna do
computer's
it.
broken, so Ashley's
I got
Ashley's
you.
got it.
Technology is the worst. All right.
Yeah.
So this one is Bethany. She says, "Hi, Rachel and Ashley. I really enjoy your podcast. Thank you so much for the insight for women who love to exercise and build strength. Yeah, that's what we're here for." She
Hmm.
says, I've been active for several years, yoga, running, hit, hiking, mild resistance training, but started lifting weights consistently for a little over a year and a half. I consider myself still a beginner, but I'm consistent with 3 times per week lifting, sometimes 4, usually an hour. I have followed a decent program, but I'm changing now. I got the Muscle Science for Women program. Good first step
Yeah. Good
because I
job.
think I need more structured guidance and I need to be more thorough. I've been in a slow body recomp maintenance phase. Um, she's saying, based on my slow and somewhat discouraging results, but I know this takes consistent effort and time. I want to move into a cut phase. Okay. Here's my dilemma. I started a new job in a new career field with long hours and an hour of commute on either side of my day. 11-hour workdays, weekdays, she's saying. Sounds silly, but I have a young kitten at home and I can't leave her again once I get home. The place I work has a
Not
decent
silly.
gym. Yeah, no, you're like,
I
I'm a
hear
pet
you.
parent and I get it.
I
Uh,
get it.
the place I work has a decent gym and I've managed to make it there consistently at least 2 lunch hours per week. The other lunch hours I walk, weather permitting. I'm getting 7 to 10K steps daily. However, I wear nice clothes for my job, and when all is said and done, changing, etc., I can truly only get about 40-minute lifting session in on the weekdays at my work gym. I lift one weekend day, sometimes two. I want to dial way up and get more focused with your program, but from the pressure and stress of this new job and my own long-standing difficulties with sleeping well, I feel like my ability to really dive deeper is limited. So, the question boils down to, first of all that background, it's good. It's a good setup because I think almost everybody listening can relate to at least one part of what she said. I
Hmm.
remember when I had like a corporate job and I would work out in the gym and I'd be like, once I get the clothes off and the clothes back on and like get in there, it's
Yeah.
like there's half your lunch. Anyway,
Yeah.
she's asking, can a 1 hour weight session be split between 2 days or does it lose its effectiveness? If 40-minute lifting sessions are all I can do for two of my lifting sessions per week, will I still be able to yield results that are consistent and aligned with my goals? So she's kind of asking, the subject of the email is, when is perfect the enemy of good? And I think what she's really saying, she says, I love being active and won't stop, is being more intense or perfectly aligned the enemy of doing the best I can with what I have right now. So she's,
Hmm.
essentially saying, I've got a lot on my plate. I'm not able to be as sort of consistent as I want to be, and I can't dedicate as much time to my training as I want to. Is what I can do good enough is kind of the
Hmm.
question. So, what are
Yeah.
your sort of initial thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean that all makes complete sense, and I do think is she saying that she can absolutely commit 2 days a week at lunchtime, 40 minutes, and then one time on the weekend?
Yes.
Okay. And I think that is absolutely, if you are being strategic about, especially if you're following the Muscle Science for Women program, you can absolutely get a lot out of that. And the way that I would go about that is those 2 days where you only have the 40-ish minutes at lunch. I would choose obviously through the Muscle Science for Women program, you can do 3 days a week, 4 days a week. You can even do 2 days a week if you want. I would choose the 3 day a week cycle, right? And on the 2 days that you're in the office and you only have that 40 minutes, I would focus on the core movements and basically take out the finisher at the end. Um, the program is in order of most important. So it's going to start with like your metric based or your compound movements and then kind of move down from there to the accessory movements and then into like the finishers, which are more of like the fun pump style stuff. So for the 2 days that you're in the office, focusing on those compound movements, the accessory movements, you should be able to get through those in that 40 minutes and really focusing on quality over quantity. And so another thing here is that if there are 3 sets of this movement and to get enough rest between that and things like that, and you're feeling rushed between your rest and not getting as much out of it, I would think about dropping it to 2 sets and really focus on going to failure for those 2 sets, at least the second set of that. So like we talk about the RIR scale in the program a lot. So making sure that that first set, you do your warm up set, and then the first set is a hard like 1 to 2 RIR, and then the last set is like a 0 to 1 RIR. So you're going very close to failure. And this is where the quality over quantity comes into play. But you really have to make sure that the quality is there because if you're not getting close to failure and you're only now doing 2 sets of this movement, you're going to miss out on gains. So it's basically we're adjusting kind of the intensity and the volume a bit. So we're bringing the intensity up a little bit by going closer to failure sooner, and we're bringing the volume down a bit by cutting 1 set, right? So those are kind of some options there where it's like, okay, I can cut out the finisher, see how long that takes me. Because you might be able to get through those 3 sets of those main movements if you cut out the finisher at the end. And then maybe you add that finisher on, to a weekend workout,
Yeah.
right? Or sometime when you have like 20 or 30 minutes where you're at home and it's like maybe you get home and you're hanging out with your kid and you're like you have some dumbbells and you want to do some bicep curls or some tricep stuff that you weren't able to do in that main workout. That's where the breaking up the workout can come into play here. Where you can do these things where you're just kind of in front of your TV, you're at home, you have a few dumbbells or some bands, and you can do some of that accessory work that you didn't have time to do, right? And then that one day on the weekend, I would choose the session that is most important to you, right? So if it's like a lower body and you can arrange your week like this, if you're really wanting to focus on lower body, right? And you're saying, okay, I want to really develop my glutes, for example, that's like my main area that I want to focus the most on, put the day where you have more time and more energy to be able to really focus in on that. So put your most important day on that weekend for the movements that you want for the movements that target the muscle groups that you are most wanting to develop, if that makes sense. So there's always going to be a solution when it comes to like timing and figuring out how to work this in your schedule. It's just being smart about it. And you already have the structure because you joined the program. Like you already have that structure laid out for you. It's just tweaking a little of these things to make it fit with like your schedule and what you have available.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, that's actually super tangible, helpful, actionable advice that's really good that she can take and use. And I would just add a couple things. First of all, if you purchase the Muscle Science for Women program, you can reach out to us directly through the platform and
Mhm.
ask questions. And that's another thing that's the add-on to this program is that we are essentially there for you both as
Mhm.
ongoing coaches and support systems where if you have questions specifically of like, how do I break up this day in a way that makes the most sense or whatever, that's what we're here for. That's what you invested in.
Exactly.
So go back into the program and ask us questions if you need it. We're there to support you. That's one thing.
Mhm.
Another thing I would say is, the title of this email is when is perfect the enemy of good or good enough? And the answer is always. And I think
Yes.
that she knew this, and this is something that we're just sort of reiterating back to her
Mhm.
is that trying to be perfect is always going to cause more problems than it solves. And if there's one word that we maybe are striving for, it's always going to be consistency. And so, even if you're feeling like you are being slightly less consistent than you'd like to be, because you'd love to work out for 4 days a week for an hour minimum, and you can't do that, if you can still do two 40-minute sessions, one on the weekend, a nice long walk another day, and you can do that consistently, that is good. That is good enough for now in the context of your life. And can you also maybe think about doubling down on consistency with other things? If you have your limited time to work out, can you make sure that you are eating enough protein, that you're eating the right
Mhm.
foods? She did mention having trouble sleeping, which, listen, that's a big part of it. And
Yeah.
that's something that we should all be focusing more of our efforts on as well. So, can you work on that? Can you improve your sleep? We talk about all of this in the program too. But you can do other things that contribute to the consistency of your overall effort to be healthy so that when you are in there trying to build muscle, you're going to do the best job you can, right? So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yep.
cool.
I agree.
Good luck. Good luck, Bethany. You made
Yes.
a
And
really
reach out to
smart
us, like you
choice.
said. Like we can
Yeah.
go in and be like, hey, do this exercise, don't do
Yeah,
this one, etc. Like that's part of the program. So
exactly.
definitely reach out to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
All right, cool. Okay, so here's another question, and this kind of is like two similar questions from two different people that reached out to me on Instagram. So I'm just going to kind of throw them together. One person, and these are very general, so we might just see how detailed we want to get with the answer. But one person was asking about how to curb sugar cravings at night, specifically. So every night she wants to dive into some sugary stuff. And another person asked about struggling with overeating and asking how to curb appetite. So again, very vague. We do not know a lot about what's going
Mm.
on here, but we probably do have lots of very high level responses to
Yeah.
this. So I don't know if you want to start and dive into it. Sugar cravings at night,
Yeah.
overeating in general, how to curb appetite.
So I actually have a tip right off the bat that like I um personally have been utilizing over the past like even just the past few days to help me get back on track with like my eating schedule. And like you said, there's so many ways that we can go down these questions, this avenue. I think really though, something that from like a general standpoint is going to help you regulate a lot of the cravings, a lot of the hunger, and all of that is getting more consistent with your meal timing throughout the day.
Mm.
That's something that, of course, we have to, like, I'm not going to go as granular as talking about how much protein you should have for each meal and how much protein you should have throughout the day. Like, those things matter. And those are the things that we teach on this podcast. We teach in our program, like the specifics behind those. But in general, if we're kind of taking a step back and we're like, I feel maybe a little bit out of control. I feel like I'm hungry at different times throughout the day. I have these cravings at night. A lot of that can be mitigated if you just start to get consistent with when you're eating your meals throughout the day. And of course, within those meals, making sure that they're structured appropriately with the amount of protein that you need, calories, fats, and all that to create, satiety and all that. So, from like a little bit of a tip thing that I've been using, which I'm sure a lot of people have already used this before. You probably already know what I'm going to like, you've used this too. But if you have an iPhone or whatever phone you have, specifically on the iPhone, there's like a reminders thing, right? There's like an app and it's like reminders, right? And so you can put in different categories. You have your lists and you can have different lists that have sub lists within them, right? And then you can put these reminders on repeat daily. And what's actually cool, that's a little bit newer of a feature, at least for me, is that these reminders can actually go into your iCalendar. And so they appear on your iCalendar in these kind of like um, faded away things. So they don't take up all of your calendar daily, but they come in the background and they have these little check boxes, like they're circles that you can check off on the calendar itself. And also you get the reminder, to check off. So what I've been doing, because I just like have been out of my routine the past, since the New Year's end of the year into the new year, just kind of been out of it. I'm like, all right, I need to get back on track with my meal timing, just feeling in control. And so I created a list under those reminders that says it's a meal list, right? So it's literally just meals. And for me, I'm like, okay, when do I eat? Like, how many meals do I eat throughout the day? When do I typically eat them? How can I get more in tune with making sure I'm eating around the same time each day? So for me, I eat about 5 meals a day. I have breakfast, I have my pre-workout meal, I have my post-workout meal, which is lunch, I have my dinner, and then I have my dessert or snack. And so for me, I'm like, okay, I'm trying to get back in the groove of things. I want to get my hunger and appetite under control because I've been sick and I want to like get that back in check. So I created these reminders and I have breakfast 8:30 a.m. every day, right? And so that's like when I eat my breakfast, I can check that box and it's in my calendar and checking the box gives you a hit of dopamine, right? Because you're creating that habit. So that in itself is just like instead of an alarm going off, which I recommend to some people, like having an alarm go off, instead of that, using this like to-do list reminders on your iPhone and being able to like check that box is, at least for me, been super, super helpful over the course of the last like week to get back on track. And so I have breakfast at around 8:30. I have my pre-workout meal at 11:30. And then I go to the gym like within the half hour, an hour of that. Then I have my post-workout meal at 2:30, which is my lunch, dinner at 5:30, and then my dessert at 7:30. And I get reminded when those are coming up to eat at that time, and I can check that box off. That for me, and everybody's different, right? You don't have to eat 5 meals per day. You could be someone who eats 3 meals per day. And when I say meals, you can see that I'm including like my snacks, right? They're not like they're meals, but they're included with the snacks. So, like basically programming that out so that you have some consistency to follow. And then you also have these reminders that can help you to get that habit into place. Eating around the same time each day, making sure those meals are composed in the right way can do so much for regulating your hunger, your appetite, your cravings, especially at night as well. And just that in general can take care of so many of these things. Um, and it's as simple as just getting consistent with it. And if you need to have these reminders, not everybody does, but this can be a great way to kind of like kick that off. Um, and it kind of goes back to like we've talked about circadian rhythm and your body adjusting to things. We talked about this earlier in the episode with training times. That in itself, your body and your hunger hormones become regulated when because they basically turn on at different times, right? And so if you get consistent and you're eating, say, every 3 to 4 hours throughout the day, and that works for you, I know that that's what works for me, especially around my training and stuff like that. Your body will start to recognize that and it'll start to become hungry at those times, right? And not hungry at other times.
Hmm.
And so if you can get consistent with eating around the same time each day, if you need reminders to do that, if you need that dopamine hit when you check that off, all of those things can play into lessening cravings and sugar and overeating throughout the other times of the day. So I know like this is just kind of something that sounds so simple and is like, yeah, like that makes sense. I do that or I can do that. But a lot of people don't do it.
Yep.
So that's going to be my recommendation as like a one kind of takeaway that you can start doing that doesn't have anything to do with what snacks you should be eating or what
Hmm.
sugar, whatever. If you want a sweet treat at night, work that into your dessert, but make it consistent
Yeah.
throughout the week. Does that make sense?
Totally. And
Okay.
just to kind of, again, add on to that, the idea of you're saying, like, a lot of people are like, oh, I know, and I've kind of done that, and it didn't really work. And it's like, there's a lot of science out there that seems to point to, generally speaking, you need to, when you're trying to do a habit change or like a habit reset, you need to do something with 100% consistency for like 3 weeks to 30 days before it becomes a habit, and then up to like 90 days before it becomes like a effortless lifestyle change.
Hmm.
That's a long time to be 100% consistent. Most people do not do it. They do it for a week or two, or they do it with 70% consistency, and then they wonder why it doesn't really feel good or they're still struggling. Because if you want to commit to something like this, if you want to get on track, you need to be on the track and you need to stay on it.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
eventually, maybe further down the road, there can be some room for more flexibility or, planned breaks or whatever it is you're going to do. But if you want to change a habit, you need to get on it. You need to be dedicated to it. And
Hmm.
I think another thing that I would say, again, not knowing any of the details of these people's like diets or lifestyles, but to me, when I think about things like overeating, I think one of them mentioned like binge eating, like overeating, just appetite issues, and then the sugar cravings at night. I think generally speaking, there's two big buckets here. And one is maybe not nourishing yourself enough at meal times, which is going to lead to overeating, binge eating, eating at night. And then there's the emotional component, right?
Hmm.
Maybe you're eating out of habit, maybe you're eating out of emotional. Um, you're trying to give yourself something that feels nice and a dopamine
Hmm.
hit and something that's comforting. Um, and that's a whole other podcast. And frankly, it's a little bit out of our scope to kind of talk about the emotional side of it. However, I think if you can do some introspection and some thinking about like, why am I doing this? Am I overeating every 3 days or binge eating on the weekends? Because if I actually audit what I'm eating during the week, it's like hardly anything. Okay, then we
Hmm.
need to go back to what Rachel was saying and like plan out your meals, make sure they're well rounded, make sure you're getting enough calories, enough protein, enough food so that your body actually has what it wants. Because a lot of times, binge eating or create like these crazy cravings are coming because your body's like, I'm not getting enough of what I need. And so I'm just going to force you to eat a ton of whatever's in front of you that is hyper palatable and easy and fun. Right. So
Hmm.
that's something to consider do you think it's more of a physical need and you just need to get your diet kind of sorted out? Or do you think it's more of an emotional, mental need, in which case you may need some other kind of support or assistance or just to kind of explore some
Hmm.
other avenues? So there's that. And then I think going back to the sort of habit formation thing, I think it's important to consider that when we want to change a habit, such as maybe eating junk food at night when you're sitting watching a movie at 11 and you're just eating garbage because it's there and it feels good and it's become a habit, when you want to get rid of a habit you don't like, it's much more effective to replace it with something else than to just say, I'm just not going to do this anymore. Like if we're
Mhm.
talking about smoking or scrolling our phones or anything, if we're just like, well, I'm just going to cut it cold turkey. Okay, you can try, and some people do that. It may be more helpful to replace it with something. And that goes into the idea of sort of progressive changing of habit. So instead of saying, I eat ice cream every night at 10 p.m., I'm just going to stop doing that. Maybe switch out the ice cream for high protein Ninja
Yeah,
Creamy ice cream that you make. Maybe
exactly.
switch it out for like whole fat Greek yogurt with some honey on it and like a little bit of something sprinkled onto it. So you're moving in a better direction. You don't have to be perfect and stopping this habit immediately because maybe eating at 10 or 11 isn't good for you, period. But if you're replacing it with something better, and then over time, maybe you only do it every other night. And then, so it's this progressive
Mhm.
idea. And it goes back to what we were talking before about perfect being the enemy of good, right?
Mhm.
So just think about it that way. If you've got this habit and it feels like it's insurmountable because you're like, I've been eating junk every night to comfort myself for months. How am I going to stop doing this? Well, do it one step at a time by making slightly better choices, by being a little bit more mindful, by, thinking about what the decisions that are leading to what you're doing every night. You know what I mean? Give yourself a
Yeah,
bit of a break and just be sort of more kind of progressive with it, I think, is another way to
yeah,
look at these habits.
yeah. I agree. And we could do a whole podcast on this stuff. And I think one other thing too is just really becoming a little bit more like disciplined to ask yourself. This is something that I've done like in the past, especially like if you're in like a dieting phase or a deficit, like you're gonna be hungry at times, but like from a cravings perspective, especially the sugar and those things, like are you truly hungry? Like literally asking yourself, like, am I physically hungry right now? Like, is my stomach gurgling? Can I eat a bowl of broccoli? Like those tricks that you ask yourself. Because if it's not, then it's emotional, right? It's
Don't
like
use
I'm
broccoli though, because I could never, I'd be
whatever.
starving and I wouldn't eat a bowl of broccoli. Use
Okay,
steak. That's my
whatever.
example.
Steak or chicken or whatever.
Yeah.
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 Like ask yourself, like, do I truly feel this hunger in my stomach, or am I looking to cover something up? Or is this
Yeah.
a habit that I've done that I've just been accustomed to? And that's where, again, coming back to the meal timing can actually help with that because if you know that it's not physical hunger and you know, like, hey, for me, eating every 3 to 4 hours helps me stay in check, then you know, like, okay, my next meal is coming up in an hour. I can distract myself until then, knowing that that's coming up. Or if it's the last meal at night, I can distract myself knowing and just get to bed, right? Get in your bed, do whatever that is, knowing that when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to have my breakfast, right? So those are just like, it does come down to, very much checking in with yourself, and it's very much easier said than done. But from that perspective, if you can just start to do that, and you actually follow through with that 1 or 2 times where you like check in with yourself, is this actual physical hunger? And you're really thinking to yourself, like, no, it's not. And you distract yourself to do something else until your next meal comes and you were able to follow through with that. That's going to give you some momentum to continue to do that within the next few days because you're like, oh, wow, I actually did that. Like, I was able to follow through with what I said I was going to do. And you feel a sense of dopamine from that versus giving in to the snack or the sugar or whatever. And you kind of get a sense of like how much better you feel following through with that than what that sugar snack did for you for 10 minutes.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of different ways to go about this, but that's just like one thing is like really, really checking in. Like, is this actual physical hunger or is it something emotional that I'm just bored or I'm stressed or whatever it may be?
Yep. Yep.
So,
Not
yeah,
not easy, but it is more simple than we let ourselves believe, right? Like I think
exactly.
we've all been in this place where you said earlier you feel kind of out of control and you're like, "Oh my God,
Yeah.
how do I get a handle on this? Like I can't stop overeating at night. I can't stop eating this one kind of junky thing that doesn't make me feel good." It can feel overwhelming. It really is relatively simple getting back on track, but that doesn't mean it's easy. It means you gotta,
Yeah.
commit to it and care about it and be consistent and just like a step at a time. You don't have to go
Yeah.
from 0 to 100. You can just, you progressively
And yeah. Make it
little.
harder too to like
Mhm,
environment wise. If this you have this thing in your house that you're going into your pantry every night, get it out of the house, right?
mhm.
Because then you have to now go to the grocery store or call Uber Eats or you don't call Uber Eats, but
Mhm.
you know what I mean. Go on that, whatever. There's like you need to put some resistance between that to make it
Yes.
harder to get to that thing.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's all the questions we are going to answer for today.
Yeah.
And I might go, I would say I would go out sledding, but I'm not doing anything that involves any kind of physical. The only thing I'm doing right now that is physically challenging is the sheer amount of time I'm spending on the ground because I have a toddler. And so I'm like playing on the ground.
Oh yeah.
And if you could see, like, months ago, I used to squat heavy weights. And now the sounds that I make getting up off the floor is really, it's really something. It's really humbling. I'm
Oh
so
my goodness.
excited to not have a baby in my body anymore and get fit again. We've talked about this before. I just can't wait, but I've got a little bit longer to go. So,
You got
anyway,
it.
I got it. Thank you,
Well,
everybody, for listening. We appreciate you. We love your support of the podcast and your lovely feedback and nice messages. If you haven't yet, please consider rating, reviewing, sharing, making sure you're subscribed. Push the little things that you get notifications when the new episodes come out.
yeah.
Um, I still like the idea. I don't know if I should be asking people to do this because it's like opening a floodgate, but again, I listen to podcasts on Spotify and now they allow comments and I'll
Mhm.
read the comments on like other podcasts that I listen to and it's sort of like social media in that people kind of complain and like say some stuff, but it's kind of cool
Yeah.
like you can start a conversation. You're listening to the
Mhm.
podcast, something that somebody said bring something up for you, you can just leave it right there. I think that's kind of cool. So if you have
Yeah.
never done that before, consider leaving a comment or something there too. Like reach out to us. We're very interactive, as you know. We are happy
Mhm.
to talk to people, even if you have something
Absolutely.
not nice to say. Even
We'll still
then,
respond.
even then, we will
Ashley
still
will for
listen
sure
to you.
respond.
Well,
All
listen, I got nothing better to do these days. All right. That's it.
right. Don't be
Until next
insane.
time, don't do stupid shit. We'll see you next time.
Okay. Love you.
Love
Bye.
you. Bye.